This is Stephen Kotler, and you're listening to Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
This is Christina Rasmussen, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, Cultural Creatives. I'm Bruce Lipton, and I'm here to join you with Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
What is up, beautiful people? Welcome back. I'm Trey Downs, and this is Your Superior Self. If this is your first time listening, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps me scale the show. It helps me get this out to those who may need it the most. And if you're a part of this discourse community, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for coming back. You're going to love today's episode, by the way. You're going to love today's guest because we talk about some of the unpopular topics in science, the ones that people are very skeptical about. Cassandra Vieten joins, who is the executive director of the John W. Brick Foundation, scholar in residence at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination at the University of California, San Diego, Santiago, and a senior fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where she served as president from 2013 to 2019. Yeah, those are some serious credentials, and I love all of that. We talk about some of my favorite topics, okay? Some of my favorite topics: near-death experiences, psychedelics, universal consciousness, the collective unconscious, all the things that Carl Jung was about. We talk about things that science doesn't want to talk about. It doesn't fit into their Newtonian physics, Newtonian model. It doesn't fit into their causal and effect, empirical evidence type of research. I mean, I don't know. I guess what Dean Radin has been doing at IONS has been phenomenal research that has been presented in the way that you're supposed to do scientific research, the data, right? And the research that he's done with RNGs, random number generators, presents information that we have influence on our environment through our emotions, through our being, through our thought. But no one accepts it. They just write it off as chance, or they write it off as, oh, that's not serious science. But it is. And Cassie, who has the credentials, who's been a part of these studies, who is doing great work, who's putting that positivity out into the world, who is helping the world become more aware, more conscious to these types of studies and this data, joins me today to talk about these topics and why they're so important. And here's a clip of what's to come.
Does consciousness survive is the question, and it's one of the biggest questions of all. Is consciousness locked inside of this brain and body? Does it, extinguish when we die, or does it survive? And did it survive before now? And those are pretty hard studies to do using science, but they're possible. There's some super interesting data, at the Department of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. And, that's the work that came out of, Ian Stevenson's work. And just this, I think part of what I learned working at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where we focused on a lot of controversial topics, is that there's a fear of investigating controversial topics. And there really shouldn't be. Sure. These things are absolutely fascinating. They're interesting. They don't have the power to contaminate science or contaminate civilization by looking into them. And, we've done a lot of work of trying to bring together the wisdom of the spiritual traditions with the practices of science to see, when they talk to each other, can they come up with solutions that maybe neither one can come up with on their own.
Oh, I love all of that. Every single word I'm all about. not being afraid and going after things that make us curious. And what she's referring to with Ian Stevenson is his work that he performed at the University of Virginia with children's past life recall, reincarnation, if you want to call it that. All the data supports individual experiences with reincarnation coming back into this life. And some of the studies are just phenomenal. Being able to recall past life events that correspond with history. Yeah, check it out. Go to University of Virginia's website, or just look at Ian Stevenson. Go Google him and find one of his books on Amazon. Fascinating stuff. And the work that Cassie's doing with the John W. Brick Foundation is fascinating as well. So for those who know Victor and Lynn Brick in the Baltimore area, know about their success. But not a lot of people know about what they're about. They're about wellness. They're about mental well-being. And they started this foundation called the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, which was founded after Victor's older brother, John, who suffered from schizophrenia, died of complications from the disease. And in all the years of his treatment, he was in the finest mental health institutions available to anyone, and never once was he put on a well-rounded, fully integrated program that included healthy lifestyle practices such as exercise, nutrition, and mind-body disciplines. And in 2015, Victor started the JWB Foundation to help give individuals and their families and loved ones struggling with mental health issues the possibility of enjoying a better quality of life. And this past May, the JWB Foundation put together an online summit titled Never Alone Summit, and they have some of the most fascinating speakers come together and talk about mental wellness, mental health. Speakers like Deepak Chopra, Russell Brand, Jewel, Sadhguru, Radhanath Swami, and many, many more. The Smith brothers from Baltimore, the co-founders of Holistic Life Foundation, Victor Brick, Lynn Brick, Russell Wilson, so many, many, many more people that come together and spread awareness about the importance of connecting with your inner being, your higher self, the collective consciousness. So check them out, and you can go to neveralonesummit.live and you can find out more about those great speakers and many, 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 many more. So without further ado, here is my conversation with the great and powerful Cassie Vieten.
Hi, this is Cassandra Vieten, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
Cassandra, welcome to the show.
Good name.
Thank you. Well, I love that part in Wayne's World when he's like, Cassandra.
Right.
Thank you for joining. Like, this is fabulous. Like, I want to pick your brain because you are big in the world of consciousness. Give everyone like a quick rundown. Like, what's your background?
Well, I'm a clinical psychologist, and so I was trained to be a psychotherapist, and most of my career after my psychotherapy training, I've spent in mind-body medicine research, looking at the impact of meditative practices on people's well-being. I've done a few studies looking at mindfulness training on both addictive disorders, quitting smoking, quitting drinking. And then when I became pregnant, I created a mindfulness program for pregnant women and new moms because it helped me so much. And so that work has been ongoing for several years. Over time, I got interested more in not just meditation, but the variety of transformative practices that people could engage in that would boost their mental health and, help them to become more, well, I like to say kinder to themselves, others, and the planet, more awake, more enlightened, more liberated. And so I started working at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I worked there for 18 years, and the last 6.5, I was president and CEO. And it was just an amazing journey. I'm still a fellow at IONS, and I love the organization, and did a ton of consciousness research, looked at the variety of the world's transformative practices, beliefs, communities, looked at extraordinary human capacities and experiences of awe and wonder and how they change people's lives. And now I'm pretty much focused 50-50, one half on the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, where we fund research and programs that are advancing a more holistic approach to mental health. And the other half of my time at UC San Diego, where I'm working with the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination and the Psychedelic Health Research Initiative.
Oh my God. I could talk to you forever. Like, seriously. What is it that, like, you talked about meditation in there, especially with new moms, helping them with, during transition into that difficult stage of being a new mom and all the stressors and anxiety that comes with that. How have you discovered, meditation outside of that help you, right? Like in everyday, stressful situations, like what does it do for you? I know it changes the brain. It can alter, different states of, from beta to alpha. How does it work for you? Like, do you experience different states of being? Have you ever experienced the oneness?
Yeah, definitely. So, when I was a teenager, I had a lot of personal struggle and angst. Just about when I was 12 or 13, I started to just feel really anxious, really depressed, really insecure. I still was, I felt like smart at school. I had a great family. I didn't have a ton of life traumas or stressors. It was mostly internal. I later found out that there was a lot of addiction, alcoholism, mental illness back in my, ancestry. But I didn't really know what hit me. And so my best solution then was to start smoking weed and doing drugs and drinking a lot. And during that time, I did have some experiences of oneness in altered states of consciousness, but I wouldn't say it was intentional or skillful. It was really an attempt to try to get out of my uncomfortable feelings. And so I ended up very early hitting sort of a bottom with addiction at age 17, going into a treatment program, getting sober, and went to college right after all that happened. And one of my first classes I took in college was on Buddhism. And I really hadn't been raised with any kind of religion. We were, kind of liberal, humanist, secular folks. But when I first had that class on Buddhism, I was like, okay, this sounds more true than anything I've ever heard. And so that started me on a journey of meditating. I ended up going to the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, which is a program that started out as the Institute of Asian Studies and integrated Eastern philosophy and Western psychology and some indigenous wisdom traditions into, method of psychotherapy, scholarship, and eventually investigating consciousness. So for me, meditation is everything from being able to observe my moment-to-moment experience and allow it to be there as opposed to fighting it and trying to make it go away or suppress it or running away from it. Being able to walk through experiences with open eyes, an open mind, and an open heart. And to be able to sort of recognize that the waves of experience, some of them are big, some of them are small, sometimes the water's completely peaceful, sometimes it's stormy. Trying to stop all that is as futile as it would be to try to actually stop the waves in the ocean. And so the only thing we can do is learn to ride the waves and, allow them to come through and pass away. And in the process, try to be as curious and compassionate to ourselves and other people as we can.
Do you believe in like a collective consciousness?
I do. At the very basic level, there's obviously a collective consciousness because what we're conscious of, how we perceive the world, we do that individually and we do it as a collective. So, everybody in the world, everybody in our country, or at least large groups, agree that, right now it's a little bit after 6 o'clock. We've decided to say in our collective consciousness, we're going to recognize time as a thing. We're all going to pretty much wear clothes in public. There's a whole collective consciousness. But I think you're probably referring to more like a capital C collective consciousness, which is there a way that our subjective experience is not only inside here in our individual heads and brains, but goes beyond that. And are there ways that maybe there's an interconnected fabric of reality that is, for most people, typically under the level of conscious awareness, but for people who have done a lot of meditation practice or have pursued, non-duality, for example, that's an experience they're having all the time. And I've certainly had personal subjective experiences of it. The Institute of Noetic Sciences was founded by the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth person to walk on the moon. And on his way back from his moonwalk in 1971, he had the window seat in the space capsule, and he had an experience of collective consciousness that was just like an overwhelming epiphany and blissful, absolute dissolution of the boundaries of the self and, interconnection with everything he saw. And he later found out that there was a description of this in Sanskrit called samadhi. It was a samadhi experience that he had, and that many, many people had that experience even on Earth. And so I've experienced that personally. It's been very moving. And at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, we also did research on it.
Well, how do you study that, right? Like, how do you predict that somebody's going to be in samadhi? Or like, I'm assuming you can control the environment enough where you can maybe replicate that, but how do you study that?
We didn't do a lot of studies where we tried to induce samadhi. I think there are some ways that we can work on that. I'm interested in psychedelic research, and there's a way that, we're doing a psilocybin study at UC San Diego right now, working on treating phantom limb pain. But those original studies by Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins showed that people frequently had these deep mystical experiences when they were provided with psilocybin and under specific conditions where they'd had some preparation, they'd had some integration, and people even 5 years later say it's one of the most profound experiences of their life, just doing psilocybin in Johns Hopkins Hospital. And so Roland Griffiths would say these reliably occasion mystical experiences. So that's probably one of the most reliable methods, but, meditation, I'm very interested in looking into virtual reality right now and giving people experiences of awe and wonder. So
explain that, like, how do you do that with virtual reality?
Oh, well, virtual reality is so great because, the laws of Newtonian physics are not, you don't have to follow the rules in virtual reality. So you can be sitting in a room at one time and then all the walls can fall down and you can fly over the Grand Canyon and, sit inside of a forest and be in a zendo. And I mean, there's just hundreds of things that you can do in VR that you can't do in ordinary reality necessarily. Sure. So we're thinking that if we can shift people's environments in VR, and if you've ever been in VR, you know that even a very cartoony VR is quite compelling to the mind-body system. Like the first time I tried it, I was going to, I think it was, one of the plank experiences where you've got to walk off the plank and drop 4 stories. And it doesn't matter how much that the floor is right in front of you. It's pretty hard to step off that plank in virtual reality.
I never even thought about that, using that like as a tool. Like, can you replicate like an experience with psychedelics through VR?
I think a lot of people are trying. One of the things that we did was we tried to recreate Edgar's experience. So we created the Edgar Mitchell VR experience, and people, it's only 11 minutes, but you wake up on the moon, you get in the spacecraft, you take off into space, you accompany the spacecraft back to Earth, all with Edgar's narration from his original archival footage and NASA footage. And you go and have the overview effect where you're flying over the Earth for a period of time. And so that's one way we're working on trying to induce awe in the laboratory and see if it has effect.
Was he the one that was trying to do like an experiment with, like, what was it, where he was like thinking of numbers to people back at home and they were trying to guess what it was?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
what is that called again?
Telepathy, remote viewing. He was trying to send clairvoyance. He was trying to send a set of symbols to people who were sitting on Earth, especially from the dark side, from the dark side of the moon. And he did have significant results, and he published them, but the significant results were that they were wrong more often than they should have been by chance. So they call it psi missing is what the terminology for that is. But, you know, Edgar Mitchell, at the end of his life, I got to visit him quite frequently over the years, and he handed me a document that had gone to the moon. And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, the original set of symbols that I was sending to people at home, and, you know, writing down the times that I was sending it." And I noticed that there was water on it, and I was, you know, water stains. And I said, "Oh, you know, this must have been kind of messed up by water spilling on it." And he said, "Oh no, that was splashdown. That was from the splashdown." So that was pretty amazing to actually have that, see that artifact.
Man, I can just imagine the people that you get to hang out with, like Dean Radin. You hang out with him at all?
Oh yeah, Dean's amazing.
Oh yeah, just hanging out.
And
with
I
Dean.
should have said, you know, the other way that Ion studied consciousness was not just people's experiences, but really trying to look at, are there ways that the mind interacts with other minds, even if there's a shield in between the two where there could be no radio signals or anything like that? And are there ways that the mind influences physical reality? And you've probably heard of the Global Consciousness Project, where there were, you know, random number generators all over the world in different spots. And they looked at when there were major upheavals in human consciousness, major events like the O.J. Simpson trial, or, you know, Princess Diana's wedding, or the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, were there fluctuations in these random number generators. And many times there were these departures from randomness that would be pretty hard to explain, given the way it should be working.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I just think that I feel like, for me anyway, and this is very subjective, just like, you know, higher consciousness is subjective. I feel like but like me doing positive things in my life, I can put that positive energy back into the collective, and so that people will, you know, either it raises the collective consciousness so that more people can become more aware of things or receive different information. Like I was just like, I seriously, this is like my testimony, where I was not very curious about this stuff at all before. And then as I started studying this stuff more, I feel like I was changing my, you know, synaptic connections in my brain, and my brain was changing and developing. And then I became a receiver of, you know, a more fine-tuned receiver to consciousness. And so like I was able to draw in more information, because information surrounds us all the time. And the more that I work out, the more that I run, the more that I meditate, the more that I put positivity out into the world, I'm contributing to that consciousness, so that when I raise my consciousness, I'm able to access higher levels of information, you know, that some people don't have access to. And like, I feel like I can, you know, when I meditate, I can have very insightful meditations, conversations, information come into me. And I'm a big believer in that. I shouldn't even say believer. I know this stuff. Like you know, like, and that's why I love, you know, what you're doing. That's why I love like your contributions to consciousness, because I think it's important. And not a lot of people understand this. And even in psychedelics, the effects of the therapy that they have, right? Like the MAPS, they're just going through the 3rd trials with the FDA. And I think their numbers are showing like 60-something% of the people that, you know, went through the 3 trials with MDMA are like not having symptoms of PTSD anymore. Like that's huge, right? Like, I mean, you think about it with addiction, alcoholism, all of this stuff, trauma, like what it can do for people.
Yeah, I mean, there's just an amazing amount of research coming out now. In fact, I was talking with Roland Griffiths yesterday because he's going to be on the Never Alone Summit next Friday on May 21st. And he was saying, you know, they're doing studies just this week. He has a volunteer coming in for an anorexia study, a stop smoking study, and a depression study, treatment-resistant depression. They had some great results with their pilot study on smoking. For example, 6 months later, 80% of the people weren't smoking, which is just unheard of, you know.
80%,
so,
like that's insane, right? Like, I mean, I don't even know if like hypnotherapy has those type of numbers.
Right. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Speaking of the summit, Never Alone Summit, I've never, like, it's only the second year, I think, right?
Yeah.
When I found out about it, like, my heart was full. Like, it is. Can you explain how it came to be and what it is?
Sure. Well, part of my work with the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation is we are, we fund research, we do programs, but we also collaborate with other organizations to change the way the world treats mental health, change the way we talk about it, change the way we think about it, and expand the number of approaches that we're using to help people with preventing mental illness, treating mental illness, and promoting mental wellness, which is different than mental health and mental illness. We can talk about that later, but the Never Alone Summit, both the Chopra Foundation and the Brick Foundation had a number of live events scheduled last year during the pandemic. And of course, we had to cancel everything. And so we were talking with each other and said, well, what can we bring to people at home that might be helpful? Because the very beginning of the quarantine, everyone was at home. It was very isolated. People were scared. There was a lot of anxiety and depression. People were losing their income. Kids were stuck at home. People were stuck at home, with their families, and, nobody knew what was going to happen. And there were increases in suicidality, in relapse to substance abuse. And so we really felt like it was urgent. So we very quickly put together the Never Alone Summit in Mental Health Month, May 2020. We had 3 days, over 100 speakers, about 120,000 views, and from over 50 countries. And it just turned out to be this incredibly magical event that was very impactful. And, the videos are today being used in a San Quentin prison wellness program, and people still continue to access them. So we felt really good about it. And we never thought the pandemic was going to be a year later. So we thought it was a one-time deal, but here we are again, just beginning to come out of it in the US, but there's still countries around the world that are worse than ever, and still locked down. And so we wanted to do it again. And this year we have a one-day summit with over 30 speakers from all around the world, teaching tools, practices, but really focusing on, more people than ever talked about their mental health issues during the pandemic, athletes and musicians and actors and late night talk show hosts. And so it kind of, the silver lining is it opened up the door to being able to reduce the stigma. And we don't really want that to go back to normal. We want to keep the door open and let people know there are literally dozens of evidence-based methods of dealing with mental health issues at home, with yourself, with your family, in your community. It's not only psychotherapy, medication, and institutionalization, although those things are useful too. So it's all about just expanding our approaches, making mental health care more holistic, making it less stigmatized, allowing people to know they're not alone, and completely free. And you can register at neveralonesummit.live or neveralonesummit.live.
Who are you most excited about to hear them speak? Because I looked at the speakers and they're all amazing.
Well, I always love to hear from the sort of well-known people like Russell Brand and Jewel and Congressman Patrick Kennedy and his wife. And, we have the 17th Surgeon General of the United States and Richard Carmona, former Archbishop of Canterbury. I mean, we just have this incredible lineup. But I have to say, it's really the boots on the ground is what's really exciting. We've got Ali and Atman Smith, for example, who are African-American brothers from Baltimore who created, after they graduated from college, a meditation and yoga program for inner city Baltimore urban kids. And so they've replaced detention with meditation and yoga. They've replaced on-campus suspension with, these kinds of skills. They've now worked in prisons. They've worked in drug treatment centers. They're working with local indigenous people. And that's just one of many stories. They're the Holistic Life Foundation, by the way, if you want to check them out. So many stories of things that are working. So we hear a lot about the statistics and, how frequently someone commits suicide and how much of a crisis it is, which is true. But we don't hear as much about what's working. And so we highlight a lot of different programs out there that are working.
That's a beautiful story. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've looked at them and I tried to pick one. Your group from India, they're fantastic. Like I'm excited to hear them. Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, I was looking at it and I was just thinking to myself, how in the world did you get all these great people? Like, how does that even start? I mean, it's a great cause, right? Like it's 100% a great cause, to speak about this, to let people know that they're not alone, to let them know that they are loved and that they are important and that we are here for them. But to get these different people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, different countries to come together on one message. I mean, how do you guys make that, how do you line that up?
Well, I think people hear the ring of truth when they hear the idea, that that's important. And it's something that we do need to extend our digital arms out to people who are at home and alone and suffering. We all have a big network, and Deepak Chopra, of course, is friends with everybody in the world. So, that's a great way to do it. He's been so incredibly supportive, and the Chopra Foundation have been great partners, and their Never Alone initiative, which you can learn more about at neveralone.love. And if you want to learn more about the John W. Brick Foundation, that's at johnwbrickfoundation.org. So it's just kind of a match made in heaven. And
sure. Mr. Brick is really from Baltimore. He's from the Baltimore area, and I think this is
you'll definitely have to have him on. Yeah, Victor
this
Brick
is awesome that he's
founder.
doing this, right? Like everybody knows him around here for, the gyms and the health and wellness centers that he has, and then, I've just found out about this summit, and I was like, man, everybody needs to hear about this because that's amazing. I think how you were gonna hit on this, and I guess this is a good lead in. What is the difference between mental health and mental wellness?
Yeah, well, we collaborate with the Global Wellness Institute, which is another wonderful place that focused on wellness at a global level. And they recently released a report on the mental wellness economy. So they were really looking at where are the dollars being spent, what are the needs, what are the opportunities, and how can the fitness, spa, wellness community respond to some of those needs. But one of the things they did in the report was they created a graph that showed a horizontal continuum with mental health at one end and mental illness at the other. We're all familiar with this idea that, you're either mentally healthy, not having a lot of disruption emotionally, mentally. You might be in the middle where there's some stress, anxiety, depression, or you might be in severe mental illness. But they added a vertical continuum as well, where the top was mental wellness or flourishing, and the bottom was languishing. And even if you have a diagnosed mental health condition, if you are working on, these things that we've been talking about, wellness practices, positive relationships, getting your psychotherapy, following through with your medication, staying connected, getting exercise, good nutrition, you can actually be flourishing. And even if you don't have very many mental health symptoms diagnosably, if you are lonely, isolated, giving into, greed, envy, hatred, jealousy, don't have good friends, don't have good influences, using substances, not exercising and eating well, you cannot have a diagnosed mental illness but be languishing. And so this idea that it's not only about mental health and mental illness, but it's also about mental wellness independent of that sort of pathogenic model, which is what disease do you have, versus the salutogenic model, which is strengths-based, and what kind of wellness do you have?
Sure, man, I love all of that. Because people need to realize that it's not a bad thing to go to psychotherapy or there's so many different methods out there that are available to people they don't know about. And that's why I love about this summit is people can come here and listen to inspirational speakers and gain more awareness about the opportunities and programs that are out there and learn. And these people are very accessible. Like you can go to the website and find out more about their information. I mean, you can learn about meditation for yourself. Meditation alone has changed my life, where I struggle with depression. I struggle with anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and it's helping me get off that medication. I think it's important for me to get off that medication for myself. Now, I'm not saying for everybody. I'm just saying for myself. I feel like I want to get off it. And meditation, a healthy lifestyle, healthy eating patterns, working out, positivity, positive psychology is a thing. And learning from that and taking tools from that toolbox has allowed me to reduce, what I was taking. It has allowed me to get off it and be more positive and not fall into the traps of depression and recognize the body for what it is. My belief, my knowing is that I'm a higher being. The body is the body, and it's producing chemicals and it's reacting to its environment. Behaviorists love to say that. And it's producing cortisol. And when I get into a situation where I feel stressful, a lot of chemicals are released, and I have to be self-aware of that. And then when I start feeling the pings and the anxiety and the anger, I have to take a step back. And like you were talking about, sit in the ocean and look at it and observe the waves and what are causing the waves? What is it? And just I can't get rid of the waves in the ocean, but I can reduce it, right? Like I can calm the storm and I can do these things. And it's so important that people understand that these tools are out there for them. And, that's why one of the reasons why I do the podcast is because I want to be an outlet for people with mental wellness, mental health, mental wellness, and for people to understand that. What is your like routine look like for you, for mental wellness? What is it that you have to do? What is it that helps you maintain that balance?
Yeah. I mean, I believe that everybody has what I call an ecosystem of mental health, like a set of interlocking activities, people, places. And, for some people, I don't want anyone in the audience to get us wrong. We're not at all anti-medication. For some people, it very much includes psychotropic medication, psychotherapy, sometimes hospitalization, sometimes support groups, day treatment. There's that crisis support level. But there's also a ton of other things. So for me, it's moving my body, healthy nutrition, being outside in nature, engaging in contemplative practices on a daily basis. For me, I do morning wake up meditation nearly every morning. And, if I happen to be very agitated, I'll play one. And I recommend that to people that, don't force yourself to do things that are really, really hard for you to do, that increase your stress level too much. You want to build your resilience by doing things that are just at the edge of your comfort zone or right over your comfort zone. But if you take on too much at one time, the likelihood is that you'll quit.
Sure.
And so do things that work for you. Relationships are very important to me. Compassion practices are important to me. And then just sort of staying in touch with checking in with values. Was I kind today? Is there something that I could have handled more skillfully today? Is there anything I need to clean up from today? So that kind of wraparound mental health care. It's not something I learned in school, I'll tell you that. I speak to audiences all the time and I say, how many courses did you take in how to navigate your inner world, both difficulties and to navigate the inner world of consciousness, intuition, imagination? How many of you had even one class session in your entire education on that? Almost no one, unless they went to a real special place.
I just found out about positive psychology. Like I didn't even know what it was. I just, like I said earlier before, we were talking before we recorded, I'm going back for psychology, and I just found out about positive psychology. I'm like, where has this been? Like, this is amazing.
Right.
The one thing I did want to point out, and this might sound pretty simple, but the one thing that has really gotten me in a really good mood lately is like having fun. Like you talk about getting out and moving, like be a kid. Like I look at my kids, I have 3 of them, and I see too many times where adults don't want to be or have fun like the kids. Like they think they're just too old, or they're too, like, I can't do that. Like I got a skateboard. I'm 38. I just turned 38, and I'm going out and getting in flow states on my skateboard and having fun and allowing myself to just be a kid, just be that kid, that inner kid. And the insight that I have on that, like, some people won't even go jump on a trampoline because it's too childlike, or they won't go play dress up with their kids because they're like, I'm too old for that. Where in the world did we come up with this rule that we can't let ourselves be like a kid? Like, there's so much fun. There's so much curiosity that it goes along with that feeds into the imagination, that allows you to create. Go and sit with your daughter and paint nails, and just, go have a tea party with them. Allow yourself to be a kid, be in the moment, and access those states of, because you can get in altered states of consciousness doing that, just with the creativity and flow states, and have insight that is just phenomenal. But I was just thinking about that the other day. I was just, going out skateboarding with my kids, and I'm thinking, why don't we do this more often? Like, people are just so worried about what people are going to think about them. Like, oh, what is Trey doing on a skateboard? He's 38. He's too old for that. No, we're human beings. Just have fun. I think that's a big part of life that we miss out on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Play, fun, creativity. And, sometimes this is about reshuffling your priorities. And we think, well, after everything on my to-do list is done, after all the work is done, that's when I can play, or I can take a vacation 2 weeks a year, and that's when I'm going to play. When really, a lot of these building blocks of mental health are things that we need to do first. I teach workshops, and we always start with the meditation, because we say, that's what we want to become a habit, is that you do your practice first, you get your nature first, you tend to your relationships first, you spend time in nature first. You think there's no possible way that I could do that. But in reality, if you have an 8-hour day of work and you did that for 2 hours, you would do twice as much work in the following 6 hours, and more productive, more creative than you would have in the 8 hours without that stuff. So it's elevating our mental wellness practices to be the center, to be the priority, knowing that that's then going to lead to us being able to be of greater service to the world.
So I have to ask you, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but have you ever done like a therapy session with psilocybin?
I have done structured psilocybin sessions myself over a 3-year period. It's been a while now, but it was it was sort of followed the Stan Groff holotropic breathwork method, but it was, a very structured day that was designed to sort of have a breakthrough. And it was one of the most important, amazing pieces of work I've ever done in my life.
Did you paint afterwards on that?
I didn't paint. No, I did some writing, but I never painted. Yeah, that's a great idea.
I'm a big fan of Stan Groff. I'm a big fan of Abraham Maslow. I'm a big fan of all those guys in transpersonal psychology. Stan Groff is what he's done. I mean, to go from having people do LSD, be the grounding, person for that. And then when they're coming out, like, they don't want to leave whatever they're, experiencing. So he comes up with this holotropic breath work that puts him right back into it. So now he's like, what is this? And then he goes and he develops this breath work where you don't have to use LSD to get into these different states of altered consciousness. And you're having the same types of benefits from the therapy. I think it's phenomenal. I think, well, for going back to that, right? Like going back to the therapy sessions or the structured psilocybin sessions that you had, like, what was the experience? Like, did it pick up right from where it left off, or was it different every time? Because with LSD, sometimes you'll see LSD people that have these experiences, they'll pick up, right where they left off, and they'll experience different, whatever they want to call it. But what is psilocybin like? What was that experience?
Yeah, for me, it was different every time. Absolutely. And I think it was pretty funny because, sometimes I would begin the day and think, all right, I'm completely surrendered. I'm open to anything. And, within 30 minutes, I'd be like, oh no, I don't want to see this. Whereas other times I would, be terrified and think, oh my God, why am I doing this? And have the most exquisitely beautiful day ever. And I think some of the major insights I've had about life and the nature of reality have come from that. There's some of the researchers I work with are at the Psychedelics and Health Research Initiative at UCSD. We're doing this study on phantom limb pain. And so we have a lot of veterans in San Diego because we have a lot of military here. But we were inspired by the story of a National Geographic explorer named Albert Lynn, and he's going to be on the Never Alone Summit also. He lost his leg in an accident, and he had very excruciating phantom limb pain, which for those of you who don't know, it's the missing limb. You feel like it's still there and you feel like it's in terrible pain. And so he tried all these different approaches to try to deal with it, medication, and, nothing worked. And then he tried this mirror box where you put up a mirror next to your existing limb. So your mind is tricked into thinking that the other limb is still there. So that kind of worked a little bit, although you'd have to walk around with a mirror all the time. It kind of went away right after he did it. So then he had heard about some of this work with psychedelics. He did psilocybin and did the mirror box while he was doing psilocybin, and it cured the phantom limb pain. And so what the researchers I'm working with hypothesize is that there is a accelerated neuroplasticity during psychedelic sessions where, a crude analogy would be like your brain becomes a little bit like moldable, silly putty, it becomes very plastic, and the insights you have or the kinds of things you learn, things you see during that session actually get reprogrammed into your brain. So there's like a little bit of a hard drive reboot. So we don't know this for sure. We do know that the brain on psilocybin has massive amounts of connections that aren't happening at other times. And so that's kind of what I think everybody's interested in, is not only does it work, but how? Why is it working?
So in 15 years, when I finally graduate college, can you guys just hire me so that I can come and work with you guys on this? Because this is fascinating work. What is it that, for right now, right? Like the listeners that are listening to this and they hear about psychedelics and the therapy sessions with that, what is it that they need to, what is it that people need to know about this, right? Like, what is it? You've done research on it. You've seen it, you've experienced it. Like, what do you need to tell them so that they feel better about it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, people should know it's still illegal. So in most states. And so, I don't recommend it necessarily. And there are studies that are ongoing that you can sign up for. So I encourage you to go to MAPS, or the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and see if there's a study that you might participate in if you're interested. For listeners who might be concerned about it, I think there's an idea that, it could be fake, like if you're having hallucinations, then it's by definition fake. And I think, what we're finding in people's experiences and now in these controlled studies is that there seems to be something that happens during these experiences that is the opposite of fake, that really brings in a huge amount of humility, authenticity, genuineness, truth, and the ability to see clearly. And I think I'd let people know too, it's just not a one-time deal. My experience is that if you don't do the work it takes to integrate your insights, more meditating, more reflection, writing, like you said, painting, it can take a couple years to integrate one journey. So, to really not think of it as a magic bullet.
Yeah. Like with LSD, I know, the work that they did in the 60s with Ram Dass and those folks. A lot of people were concerned about that. Was it the chemical that's doing this, is creating hallucinations? And I mean, they said it basically was the key that unlocked the brain or the consciousness for the universal. Like Ram Dass, he said something in his biography that stood out to me. It was like, psilocybin and MDMA, he didn't say MDMA, but he said psilocybin basically unlocks the, what is it? Not the astral, it unlocks the astral plane, right? Like that astral plane of reality or whatever. but LSD takes you, it's like I mean, it takes you so far out in consciousness. It's not even, that's why I asked you if it was the same for you, because a lot of the LSD sessions that I read about, the research, the people that are underground with it, they say it picks up and they feel levels of consciousness, the collective pain, the suffering, the energy. They feel that they don't just feel the highs, they feel the lows, and it's changed them dramatically. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like near-death experiences. You know, we did tons of studies on transformation at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And when people had radical positive transformations in their consciousness that brought more meaning and joy and hope and purpose, only a third of those came from experiences of beauty and awe and wonder. 2/3 of them were deconstruction, you know, having a near-death experience or losing a loved one or getting an illness or, you know, getting shattered by an addiction. That these kinds of crises, you know, disasters can not only, you know, break us apart, they can break us open. And, you know, when people go through it under certain conditions and when they have a learning mentality around it, or they have support from friends and family members and even maybe divine grace in some ways, you know, they get the chance to experience post-traumatic growth, where the things that they thought were important, they no longer find important. And now, you know, when people have these experiences, often it's very difficult for them to engage in behaviors that benefit themselves while harming others after that.
Sure.
It's not like they have to think about it. It's not like they have to control themselves. They can't do it. You know, it's very hard for them to do it anymore. It's hard for them to do anything that would damage the planet. And so, you know, that's why when we talk about mental health right now, a lot of times we're talking about just bringing people, you know, getting rid of symptoms and bringing them up to a normal, so-called normal state. And, you know, all of these practices are, you know, I think we can do a lot better than that,
Sure.
you know, and there are ways of being and ways of dealing, even if you continue to have symptoms for the rest of your life. You know, there are ways of navigating life that just bring a lot more richness and joy and beauty. And often when people stop focusing only on themselves and they start focusing on what they can do for others and how they can be of service, and then all of a sudden they start to find the joy that they had been seeking their whole life.
Beautifully said. What is it like, what is it that makes you curious, right? Like, what is it that fires you up, that makes you curious, that you go after, that you can't get enough of?
Oh, all of this stuff.
All of this stuff. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I get it.
You know, yeah. I mean, I'm lucky that I get to do in my job what I would do if I didn't have to work. And, you know, I could talk about it all day and night and never get tired of it. And
Sure.
I think that's one of the keys to, you know, happiness and purpose and flow, is for people to think about, you know, what kinds of stuff did you do all the time when you were a kid? You know, what kinds of things are you endlessly curious and fascinated about? And, you know, try not to edit and judge yourself at first about what it is. Just, you know, what really interests you? What do you feel curious about? And to, you know, follow that in big or small ways.
Sure. Do you do anything when, like, near death? I mean, you did near death experiences and things like that. Like, I mean, I find myself very curious about that, right? Like, just like with Raymond Moody and his work, Dr. Raymond Moody, and how he's been able to, you know, he was basically the guy that did it, right? Like, that put all this research together and presented it and put it in a book and published it. Like, and he'll say in his book Paranormal, he'll be like, I didn't prove anything. I just got you to the pearly gates. Like, I got you there. You know, I haven't gotten you past that. But to think about how similar all those stories are, right? Like, and think about that. Like, when we die, we experience that. And some of the stories you can't, like Anita Moorjani, Eben Alexander, all those stories are just so amazing. But it's scary too, because if that's true, then everything that we believed up to this point isn't really accurate. You know what I mean? Like
right. I mean, does consciousness survive is the question, and it's one of the biggest questions of all, is consciousness locked inside of this brain and body? Does it, extinguish when we die, or does it survive? And did it survive before now? And, those are pretty hard studies to do using science, but they're possible. There's some super interesting data, at the Department of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. And, that's the work that came out of, Ian Stevenson's work. And just this, I think part of what I learned working at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where we focused on a lot of controversial topics, is that there's a fear of investigating controversial topics. And there really shouldn't be,
Sure.
These things are absolutely fascinating. They're interesting. They don't have the power to contaminate science or contaminate civilization by looking into them. And, we've done a lot of work of trying to bring together the wisdom of the spiritual traditions with the practices of science to see, when they talk to each other, can they come up with solutions that maybe neither one can come up with on their own.
So take your scientist hat off for a minute. Like, what do you think happens? Like, what do you believe happens after we go through this life? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe that, consciousness, we go back to our one self and we come back down? Like, what does that look like for you?
I guess I have two answers to that on a personal level. One is that I think it's probably weirder and more complicated, either weirder and more complicated or weirder and simpler than any of us think. Like, it's not even something we could actually grok from our current mental state. But my other answer, I've had my own experiences of, I was born in 1969, and I swear I'm convinced that I was just instantly reincarnated, because as soon as I was born, as soon as I hit 10, 11, 12, I was absolutely fascinated by everything from the 60s. I had pictures of Haight-Ashbury on my wall and Woodstock, and, everything just felt so familiar. Janis Joplin and the Doors, like all this stuff I was just compelled by because it felt familiar. And when I went to the California Institute of Integral Studies, it was 2 blocks from Haight-Ashbury. I just felt like my whole life was unfolding in this interesting way. And even studying all this consciousness stuff, have always really felt comfortable with people who were about 10 or 20 years older than me. So I've had these wonderings if I was around right before I came back in. A couple times with my daughter, she's 20 now, but when she was a toddler, and some of this work speaks to this, that right up until about age 4, the kids still have memories, but after that, their frontal cortex completes its growth process and, gets rid of all that stuff. But we were walking down the street one day and saw a guy in overalls, and she said, "Mom, I used to wear those shirt pants things when I was big."
Isn't that crazy? That's awesome.
She had like a few different comments like that I was like,
Like Carol Bowman has the same stuff. Like, I don't know if you read her work or not. Like, her work is Carol Bowman. Read her stuff, because she's had I guess experiences with both her children and documents that. It's fabulous. I could talk to you all night, by the way. How can people reach out to you? How can they find out more about you?
Well, about me, CassandraVieten.com, CassandravIeten.com. And then, of course, I really want people to come to the Never Alone Summit. So you can find that at neveralonesummit.live. You can register there. It's completely free. It's on May 21st, and it'll be evergreen for people who are listening to this after that on the same website. You can learn about the Institute of Noetic Sciences at noetic.org, and the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation at johnwbrickfoundation.org.
Last question, Cassie, kind of big. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, good question. I did a lot of work for a while on my purpose, which I think speaks to the legacy, which is that I want to shift perspectives in ways that help people see new possibilities and make them kinder to themselves, others, and the planet. So if I can leave a few knowledge, tools, skills, methods that people can shift their perspectives in ways that allow them to see new possibilities and be kinder to themselves, others, and the planet, that would be my legacy.
Beautiful. Cassie, I can't thank you enough for coming on here. You
thank
definitely
you. Thanks for doing the
rocked,
podcast.
you rocked this thing. I look forward to watching the summit. I look forward to your work in the future. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, let's stay in touch.